On behalf of the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, the Administration for Community Living, and the Indian Health Service, I'd like to welcome everyone to the Long-Term Services and Supports webinar series. My name is Katie Terra, and I work for Kaufman and Associates, and I'll be your moderator today. Today's webinar is on the Native Aging in Place project. Before we begin, I'd like to highlight the main features of your Zoom webinar interface. So the presentation slides are what you'll see in the main window, and the speakers will appear at the top just above the presentation. At the bottom of your screen is the Zoom menu bar, which is where you can find the Q&A box. We encourage you to use the Q&A box to submit any questions that you may have at any point during the webinar, and then we will leave time for a Q&A segment at the end of the session to address all questions. At the bottom of your menu bar, you will also find a chat box. Please use the chat box to report any technical issues you may be experiencing, and we will respond to those concerns as they come in. Additionally, live captioning is available during today's broadcast. You can simply click the CC icon from the bottom menu bar to use this feature. Finally, please be aware that today's webinar is being recorded and that the recording will be made available online in the near future on cms.gov. If you'd like a copy of the slides sent to you directly, please email ltssinfo@kaufmaninc.com. And we'll go ahead and drop that email address in the chat box so that you have it if you'd like to email that. And with those announcements made, I would like to welcome everyone to today's webinar. Thank you all for joining us today. Please note that this webinar series is supported by a contract awarded by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this webinar are those of the presenters and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the Department of Health and Human Services or the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. I would now like to introduce our presenters. Colette Adamson is Director of the National Resource Center on Native American Aging and the Native Aging in Place project. Michelle Meyer is the Senior Project Coordinator for the National Resource Center on Native American Aging and the Native Aging in Place project. And Heather Lawrence is the LTSS Tribal Liaison for the National Resource Center on Native American Aging and the Native Aging in Place project. And so with that, I'll turn it over to you, Colette. Oh, Colette, I believe you might still be muted.
Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome and thanks so much for being here with us today. We're excited to present on our project. And so for the webinar, our team will be discussing the Native Aging in Place project, which has developed a model for building sustainable LTSS capacity at the Spirit Lake Tribe in North Dakota. And in this presentation, our team will be discussing the value of the Native Aging in Place project by providing an in-depth review of how the project has helped to accelerate and strengthen local capacity to develop, deliver, and evaluate a long-term services and supports program for elders at the Spirit Lake Tribe. So essentially, this project, just to give you an idea, has been a trailblazing effort in developing and building the first tribal QSP agency in North Dakota. We'll also be discussing the challenges and successes of taking on this effort. And lastly, we'll be talking about how to develop a sustainable model of community-based services to assist tribal elders to age in place in their communities. We're hopeful that the model for NAPP that we'll be presenting will be helpful in serving as a resource and guide for tribes who are interested in building their LTSS capacity at the local level for their tribal elders. Next slide, please. So the NAPP is a project that is part of the National Resource Center on Native American Aging. And just to give you a little bit of a background on our center, it's a 27-year center that has served tribes, Alaska villages, and Hawaiian homesteads. And throughout the years, we have provided resources and training materials to address the needs of tribal elders throughout the nation by working in partnership with Title VI programs. Our center is located at the University of North Dakota School of Medicine and Health Sciences, and we're housed at the Center for Rural Health. And the Center for Rural Health has also provided extensive resources in terms of rural health for over 40 years. We're also funded by the Administration for Community Living through the Office of American Indian, Alaska Native, and Native Hawaiian programs. And we do have 2 sister centers in Alaska and Hawaii that we work with collaboratively. Next slide, please. So the mission of the NRCNAA is to identify and increase awareness of evolving Native elder health and social issues. And one of the ways we do accomplish this is through our main project, which is the Title VI Needs Assessment. And this needs assessment that we've conducted with tribal elders through the Title VI programs throughout the nation has helped us to identify priority needs among our Native population at both the national and tribal levels. And this includes the gaps in service and the need for LTSS, as well as the desire for our elders to age in place at home. And the vision of our center is to empower Native people to develop community-based solutions while honoring and helping to maintain cultural values. And a part of this has been taking the identified needs of our elders and developing resources to attempt to address these areas in a culturally appropriate manner in partnership with the tribes we work with. And the Native Aging in Place project is an example of these efforts that have expanded to develop a community-based solution to address LTSS that is in partnership with the tribe and getting the input from the elders and community to design an LTSS model that fits the culture, traditions, elder needs, and the community as a whole. Next slide, please. Now that I kind of given you the connection between the NRCNAA and the NAPP project, I want to delve more into the NAPP itself and how this project came about. So the Native Aging in Place project is a collaboration between the Spirit Lake Tribe, the University of North Dakota College of Nursing and Professional Disciplines, and the NRCNAA. It was funded in 2016 by Margaret A. Cargill Philanthropies. However, the idea for NAPP itself and all it entailed had been a culmination of 6 years of community conversations that included tribal elders, tribal health and education programs, and multidisciplinary professionals, just to name a few. So this was a project that had many years of building before it actually came to fruition in 2016. So the conversations from the community conversations resulted in identifying challenges, gaps in services, and strengths within the tribal community, namely the Spirit Lake Tribe. All of these areas were identified throughout these discussions, building up to an effort to address these gaps in LTSS within the tribe. In addition, the conversation showed a real need to empower our elders to age in place in their tribal communities, and the NAPP provided that opportunity to accomplish this goal for the Spirit Lake Tribe. The overall purpose of the NAPP is to accelerate and strengthen local capacity to develop, deliver, and evaluate a long-term services and supports program with Spirit Lake tribal elders. And the overall goals of the project have been to empower the tribe to develop a sustainable model of community-based services, which include LTSS workforce development and caregiver support. And this has also allowed tribal elders in the community to successfully age in place. The other goal of the NAPP is to share this developed model with other tribal nations to use as a resource and guide to develop their LTSS community within their local tribal communities. So now that I've kind of given a background of the NAPP project, I'm going to turn it over to Heather to talk about the Spirit Lake Tribe.
As Colette said about Spirit Lake Tribe, it's formerly the Devil's Lake Sioux Reservation, located east central North Dakota, south of Devil's Lake, largest natural body of water, the second largest body of water in North Dakota after Lake Sakakawea. As you can see, we have some boundaries within our reservation. Spirit Lake Tribe did a compact in June of 2016. With that compact, our tribe became 638 in 2016. The compact responsibility and funds are for federal programs, functions, service, or activities transferred from the federal government to the tribe. With this compact, it helped our community on the Spirit Lake Reservation, including the tribe, the clinic, our casino, Sioux Manufactory, the public schools, and our tribal colleges. With this project, it really helped our community on Spirit Lake. And as you can see, the residents, 4,238 residents populated on our reservation. Next slide. And I'm going to turn that over to Michelle.
Hi, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the research model that was used, both with the Native Aging in Place project and the conversations that have framed the discussion around long-term services and supports at Spirit Lake. It's the tribal participatory action research model that's been used. And this model, the purpose of the model is to have direct guidance and collaboration from both tribal stakeholders and local partners throughout each phase of planning, implementation, and evaluation. And the foundation for the Native Aging in Place project actually began with a project that was funded in 2009 from the USDA. This, as I'm sure everybody knows, IHS doesn't have the appropriate amount of funding or even a formal mechanism to provide in-home community-based long-term services and supports for our Native elders and their caregivers. So this USDA project was titled Strengthening Community and Home-Based Health Services for the Spirit Lake Nation. This project worked to assess the elders' needs and build community capacity for a sustainable system of elder-focused home-based community services for Spirit Lake Nation. There were several significant impacts that resulted from that project, and we've been able to kind of build on those, and we use those to develop the Native Aging in Place project. One of these impacts of the original, the USDA project, was a program called, within that project it was considered the Treasured Elders program. And what that program was it really was a community outreach program that would go into the home and assess the needs of the elders. And then they would follow up and they would network with local providers and state providers and try to make sure that the needs were actually being met. Another significant piece of the USDA project that has played a big part in our NAPP project is the Native Elder Caregiver Curriculum was utilized to train in-home care providers. Next slide, please. So the Native Elder Caregiver Curriculum was developed with the advice and the guidance from an elder advisory group at Spirit Lake. And it's really been found useful in training caregivers in tribal communities and helping them better take care of their elder loved ones. And it was originally designed to meet the needs of family caregivers who were doing home and community-based services. Currently, it's being offered by local health professionals like nurses who've had the experience in providing that direct care for older adults. And we are currently in the process of updating of the Native Elder Caregiver Curriculum. And we're hoping to create a version that's a bit more user-friendly and accessible. We hope to have that version out sometime this year. But the current curriculum can actually be found on the NRCNAA website. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned, the Native Aging in Place project has taken some lessons learned or best practices from that previous project, not only to expand and strengthen long-term services and supports, but also as a way to empower the Spirit Lake community in building a sustainable system of services that actually allow their elders to stay in the community and to age in place. Next slide, please. A big part of that system of services is what's called qualified service providers. We call them QSPs. So North Dakota, they have two options for in-home home and community-based services under their state Medicaid plan. So QSPs, or really what the rest of the country calls direct care workers, they have two ways of doing it. You can either be an independent QSP, where you are an independent contractor and you sort of own your own business. Or they have QSP agencies, which utilizes a business model for providing those homemaker and personal care services. Another lesson that we learned from the previous project was training and providing training to independent QSPs. While it was a good thing, it wasn't the surest way to build a sustainable network of long-terms and services and supports. Next slide, please. So what we decided to do for the NAPP project was utilize the QSP agency model. And that model does several things. It provides an infrastructure for the delivery of services. It provides that infrastructure for hiring employees, monitoring and maintaining all the documentation that's needed. And then also, of course, the billing mechanism for billing either third-party services for, let's say, like Medicaid, or even private pay. So billing for those services. The agency model also helps with things like, supervision. So making sure that the services that are being delivered are, being done correctly. One thing that really has been helpful for our workforce at Spirit Lake is it also provides a stable salary. In the independent model, the QSPs are the individuals responsible for doing those billings to the state themselves. And so if there's some trouble with how that works through the fun MMIS system that CMS has, that sort of falls back on them. Whereas in an agency model, they get paid their hours and they don't have to necessarily worry about that billing piece of it. So that's been really helpful for the workforce at Spirit Lake. And then, the other thing that is really important in having an agency is that the agency is able to monitor the cares that are being delivered and the quality of cares. And that was really important to the tribal council. And having the agency model, using that model, we had also hoped that would be sort of a pipeline for us to continue creating workforce of well-trained caregivers at Spirit Lake. Next slide. And I'll turn it back over to Heather.
So with that being said, in developing the Spirit Lake Okeechobee QSP agency model, in 2017, the NAPP team took on the undertaking of applying to the state for Spirit Lake Okeechobee to become a QSP agency. So like Okeechobee in Dakota means helping one another. Elders input was very important on naming the Spirit Lake QSP agency. Okeechobee was the first tribal QSP agency in North Dakota. the tribal sovereignty caused a lot of confusion on the state side, which in turn caused a lot of confusion on the tribal side. So when we brought this to the state, we were in the loop of how tribes should be putting in their application process. It was a lot of confusing in the beginning, but working through with the State Department and getting our QSP license number, it all turned out to be the best because it was a learning process for both the state and the tribes on putting in what cares are needed for each community. Because I think each tribe is really different and unique when they put their applications into the state when applying for a QSP agency. Because like Michelle explained, you can be an independent or you can be part of an agency. And with tribes coming now, taking back that our elders want to stay home in our community and family members want to take care of family members, that was brought to our attention and stuff of why this whole agency came apart back in 2015. In 2017 is when we really launched the Spirit Lake QSP agency on our reservation. So as of today, Spirit Lake Tribe and Turtle Mountain Band of Chippewa operated, tribally owned and operated QSP agencies, and Standing Rock Sioux Tribe are in the process of working hand in hand together along with the NAPP project to make sure that all 5 tribes in North Dakota succeed in getting their own QSP agency for their own reservations to help out their community. And today, Spirit Lake, we've served 35 clients. And as you can see, Spirit Lake has their own logo for their own QSP agency, and one of our younger members named Allie Little created our logo for Spirit Lake. Next slide, please. Throughout this whole process and doing our QSP agency, we made a huge difference in Spirit Lake's process of developing our own agency. It made a big difference in the lives of our elders. This is credited to the partnerships that we have built during the whole process in starting the agency. The collaborations that have been created with this project was just amazing. We had interdisciplinary team meetings that were held weekly, and to this day, they're held every Wednesdays at noon, just so that our team members that are on it, like our clinic staff, our PHNs, our CHRs are all involved in our interdisciplinary. So we had it during the meeting, during noon, so that they can bring their lunches over and participate and bring guidance to the table and whatever we need that day to succeed throughout that week with our clients, our patients, or if anybody's getting discharged and stuff. Tribal members now know about these services and are now more comfortable in letting us come into their homes to assist. In the past, they were afraid of letting anybody into their homes because they were scared that they were going to a nursing home or going to a hospital. So it took some time and effort in making that trustworthy throughout our communities with our elders. Next slide. Like I said, communication and collaboration, partnerships was very important. Making those partnerships in our communities, breaking down the silos was another thing, was a big thing in our community and stuff. Creating awareness and sharing the information, because a lot in my community did not know what a QSP even was at all. So we had to bring in a lot of regular meetings, community information centers meetings in all 4 districts. Spirit Lake has we're divided into 4 districts throughout our reservation. So us team went in and we brought a lot of information, because it's a lot of information for elders to understand what's going on in their community, what's working, even with our CHR program, even with our PHNs. So we work closely with those 2 organizations on our reservations to make things so we're not overlapping services. We want to make sure that no services were overlapping, that we all worked hand in hand. Recruitment was a big workforce thing also. We need to make sure that recruitment workforces were going to be evolving throughout our community and stuff like that. A lot of assessments and knowing and receiving information back helped us. So with the community meetings and with the interdisciplinary meetings and stakeholders, we learned a lot from those meetings. And that's kind of where we kind of built the agency information for the tribe off of it. So that helped out a lot, creating in collaboration and stuff like that. We also made along the way, we also made vulnerable partners with our vulnerable adults or HCBS case managers. They're very crucial in the involvement of becoming an agency and stuff. So this is really neat. I mean, if you can sit down one-on-one with your HCBS and your VAPS worker, and you're discharging from the hospital, the clinics, knowing what's out there for your community and how you can help them provide services is very crucial in helping building that trust with your partners and program providers and stuff like that. Next slide. Like I said, building trust was a lot in my community, letting them know that you are here to help and all this stuff. So like your outreach services was a very crucial point in our agency. We had our own outreach person that was amazing. She went out and did a lot of outreach services, bringing back the information and how we're going to build those relationships and what we can do for our community and stuff, and just going that extra mile, making sure that things are all met and all the needs that are met for our community. The linking the LTSS with the hospital discharging is another thing, is very important. We had a lot of meetings with our hospital in Devil's Lake and in Grand Forks. We made some partnerships. We had some meetings with them to let them know that we were there if an elder or anybody was being discharged, what we could do, what the services are on Spirit Lake Reservation with community health representative, our public health, our clinic, our nurses, our doctors, and our veteran service was very important. Going through the building to trust part, we learned that a lot of our veterans on our reservation weren't getting the needs that were met, that they could actually move forward. It was very crucial, but like I said, that outreach service component is a plus to have in your agencies. And I know Title VI programs have outreach services. So we kind of linked up with that services to help with our QSP agency also. And USDA project that was important in community outreach, reliable, consistency, having outreach that helped us build a trust with providers and our elders. The NAPP outreach worker helped fill the gaps by conducting referrals, follow-ups, and connecting the elders with the providers that they needed to be connected with. Next slide. Something concrete. Like I said, stakeholder meetings built that concrete platform in the beginning of our process. So having those stakeholder meetings regularly, bringing everybody to the table, helped us build the concrete to build the sustainability program that we have now at Spirit Lake. Understanding the economic needs, when we brought this to the table to our elders, brought it to our council, we had to tell them that, you know, this is going to build jobs in our community. This is going to keep our elders at home longer rather than a nursing home or a swing bed. And it's kind of like helping hands, you know, you're helping one person get a job and you're also keeping an elder at home. The Native Aging in Place Project and the Tribal QSP Agency has established something solid for the whole community, not only for elders. We also became a supportive network for family caregivers and independent QSPs. We found out through this process that there's a lot of independent QSPs that are out in our community. So we also welcome them into our agency for any trainings that they need, any informations. If their caregivers had some questions, we tried to find the resources that will help them and stuff. So like our QSP agency hosts in QSP in-services once a month, and we bring a topic to the table that our QSPs need. Our independents have some questions, we find those resources for them. The Tribal QSP Agency also helps build local capacity by creating training opportunities and creating jobs in our community. That was something that had to be buy-in to our community, making sure that we're helping each other in any way. But we also have really good support throughout my whole community out here. I made so much good partnerships with other programs. Our food distribution program works hand in hand with us and stuff. So it's really nice. And since we started in 2017, like I said, 2015 is the long process that started this process, but 2017, since we started billing and operating, we brought in over $185,000 in 2.5 years for reimbursement dollars. That sustains our QSP agency now. Next slide.
And I just want to clarify one point that Heather made. We started the application process for the QSP agency took about a year for us to complete. So we started the application process in 2017, and we did our first billing in December of 2018. And so, yeah, like Heather said, in about 2.5 years, the Tribal QSP agency has able to bring in over $185,000 back into sustaining jobs and bringing that back into the community. Heather mentioned a lot about, how the QSP agency and how our Native Aging in Place project has tried to work hand in hand with independent QSPs. We understood that, well, we understand now, that workforce development it's a marathon, it's not a race. And we're learning and have been learning that it takes time, and it doesn't always happen kind of on the timetable that we'd like it to happen on. The times that you have the perfect amount of staff to the perfect amount of clients are very few and far between. But the independent QSPs and the family caregivers have really been an important piece of the puzzle. We've had some, independent QSPs actually become employees of the agency. And so that, that ties back to something I said earlier. They're able to get a steady paycheck. We've also been able to, we don't ever have a thought either way on whether or not somebody stays an independent, but there have been times where we've had individuals who wanted to remain an independent QSP because maybe they only wanted to care for their loved one. But what we've been able to do is we've been able to work with them and then provide respite for them. And so they, then they're able to kind of take a break every so often, and they're not, it really helps reduce that burnout. And it also offers peer support. It gives the independents somebody that they can kind of talk to when they're having issues. I think we had mentioned that the Native Elder Caregiver Curriculum is been working to train not only QSP agency QSPs, but also those independent QSPs. And like I said earlier, we call them QSPs, but they're really direct care workers. And currently we've trained about 20 individuals through the Native Elder Caregiver Curriculum. And Heather had mentioned that there's in-services that are provided by the agency. And then we've brought some other training to Spirit Lake. And we've opened those up to the community, including those family caregivers and the independents. Next slide, please. The project has had its share of challenges. This project started back in 2017. I forget, it's been a while now. There has been some challenges. One of the Heather had mentioned earlier, tribal sovereignty turns out became quite the issue when applying for approval from the state. And mostly that was because, the answer we got a lot, well, nobody's ever asked before on how to do some of these things. And so when it came time to complete application, they didn't really know how to handle the tribe. They were used to a business of filling out those applications. And so it took a lot of discussions, like Heather had mentioned, back and forth. And so I think we stumped the state more than once on a couple different things. So that was a big challenge. We're learning that there continues to be miscommunication, as I'm sure some of you have experienced, between the various systems, the state systems and the federal systems and the local systems. In North Dakota, our whole HCBS case manager system just got revamped, and now they used to be county workers and now they're state workers. And so that's made for some challenges. There's been a lot of different things and that have happened. And what we're learning is that there has to be that continual education and sharing information, not just with our elders and our caregivers, but that it has to be, you have to have those constant conversations with your tribal leadership and your state leadership. So for us, we're constantly visiting with our aging director, and we're trying to make sure that we have those communications that stay active at the state level and at our local level. We found that has been very, very helpful in keeping things moving forward. And the other, what we've also learned, that recruiting and keeping good staff is sort of always a challenge, and that's not unique to tribal communities. That's a fact everywhere. And so that's also a challenge that we face with our QSP agency as well. So next slide, please. We did want to wrap up on a bit of a positive note, though, and this is sort of what we based our sustainable long-term services and support network on. We really felt that all of these, and we've learned now these last 4 or 5 years, that really all of these pieces have to be in constant communication and collaboration with together in order to build that sustainable piece of it. You have your training and support and your outreach, like Heather mentioned, having that constant input from our elders advisory group is crucial, and the stakeholders at the local level, tying those to that outreach to the services that are available for our elders, making sure that we have, good policies in place for recruiting and retaining good quality staff. And then hopefully, getting those working out processes that allow for those reimbursement dollars for those eligible services to come back to your community and go again. And while this piece of this image, for us, it had the tribal QSP agency in the middle. But, for your community, it might not be a direct care agency that works for your community. It could be, you could take any one of those services that you either are already providing, or you could take a service that you feel needs to be provided and pop that in the middle. As long as you have all the other pieces, you really have a good start to building what is a sustainable network of providing long-term services and supports. Next slide. And I think that was our last one.
Great. Thank you, Colette, Michelle, and Heather for the fantastic presentation. So this is our time for questions and answers. So I see that we have a few questions coming in already, but as a reminder, you can enter your questions in the Q&A box, which is located at the bottom of your screen. So the first question we have here is, what kind of traditional beliefs by participants have you needed to address to get buy-in from recipients and the tribal leadership?
I think at first it was tough to get people to understand what a QSP was versus what a CHR is in our community and what they both can do if working together. Our council at that time wasn't aware of what a QSP was also. So there was a lot of times that we had to come in as a stakeholders meeting to explain why we thought this was important in our community. But as I don't think most of you have known that I was the former Senior Service Title VI Director for my tribe. So once as a Senior Service Director, Title VI Director, I was learning how important outreach was and what was needed in the community. And that was one of the things that was said from by our elders, was that they needed some help in their homes. If it was a family member or if it was somebody else, they were looking for that help. So bringing that to the table, to the council and to the community, meaning like our stakeholders group, to come up with a plan on that. So it did take a lot of meetings. And when council changes every 4 years or so, you have to kind of reteach your council what the meaning of having a QSP agency in your community is. Do you have anything to add, Michelle?
I do, just a little bit. Heather is exactly spot on. The other way that, we made sure all of our workforce has to go through the Native Elder Caregiver curriculum. And like we mentioned, that curriculum, while it provides some hands-on on how to provide personal cares to elders, it also tries to involve some of the culturally appropriate areas that we want to make sure that our workforce is aware of when going into an elder's home. All of our workforce are either enrolled at Spirit Lake Tribe, or they're other enrolled in other areas. So I do feel like there is that's how we try to address that.
Great, thank you so much. So our next question is, can you share some of the input provided by the Elders Advisory Group?
I'm going to take this real quick, Heather, but I'm going to let you follow up on it, because as the Title VI director, you heard a lot more of what they had to say than I did. But one of the pieces that was really critical that we heard at the beginning from the Elders Advisory Group was, after they were educated on what a QSP agency is, as opposed to the independent QSPs, they understood that we would be going for and utilizing this business model. But it was very clear, they were very clear with us, and they said, okay, that's great, but who's going to be watching over and training and educating, you know, the people who aren't going to work for your agency? And at the time, we hadn't necessarily planned for that. And so, you know, that was one of the needs that they came back and said, you know, we're happy that you're doing this, but you can't forget about this group of caregivers that is taking care of our elders. And we want to make sure that, you know, that they are also being supported, you know, that they're able to get proper training as well. And so, so that was one of the things that, that's one of the big takeaways I always remember of from the Elder Advisory Group. But like I said, Heather probably heard a lot more than I did.
As a former Title VI director, we have an elder board. So when we brought this project to the table, the QSP, we made sure that we had some elders sitting on the board, so they know what was going on, what we were going to decide to do, in what direction, and we had their guidance. So that's why it was very important, and today is still important, to have an elder advisory board. And with Title VI at Spirit Lake, we have 9-member board that we take things to. We ask any new grants that we're going to try to work on or want to bring to Spirit Lake. We do take it in front of our Elder Advisory Board. So they play a really crucial role in our community and any projects that we work on. And I take their advice, you know, with a grain of salt sometimes, because sometimes our elders can't be nice or see the big picture at first in the direction that we would like to take it in. But it's very important to have that input along with your tribal council input also. I hope we answered your question.
Okay, so the next question is, to what extent are people with intellectual and developmental disabilities served in this program?
I'm not sure if we ventured on or said anything, but our agency for the QSP agency, it's birth through elder. So we do have, you know, we do take care of clients with disabilities and challenges and stuff like that. Our HCBS worker does refer all our clients to us unless a family member inquires that the family member needs some services. So at that point, we reach out to the HCBS worker with that family member to give them their information to start the process with us. Do you have anything to add, Michelle?
I don't think so.
Okay, here's our next question. Can you explain if the NAPP program and related LTSS services are limited to the tribal communities in North Dakota, or would they be available to other Native Americans throughout the US, such as the Nanticoke tribes in Delaware?
I think it depends on your state. North Dakota, like I said, they call them QSP agencies, right? But there are a lot of private businesses that run direct caregiving services for communities. I know in North Dakota that we have them. There is probably even some of the larger medical providers in our state. They have their own agencies, so to speak, where they send caregivers in to provide these services. The process runs through home and community-based services, and they conduct an assessment. And then what happens is, so for home and community-based services, it's really left up to the individual to choose who they want to provide those services. If it is, they can choose an individual or they can choose an agency. And I don't think that that's different. I think that's consistent throughout all of the states. Some of it depends on each state has their own, of course, Medicaid plan. And so some of it is tied to that, on what services can be provided, and then how an agency gets approved to provide those type of services, or an organization gets approved to provide those type of services. So some of it you have to work out through your plan. In Minnesota, for example, which borders North Dakota, they don't have individuals. They only have agencies. So they don't, if you're providing personal cares to somebody and getting paid for it in Minnesota, you're only getting paid for it from that individual, from the person that you're caring for. You're not getting paid through Medicaid or from some other federal or state source. You're only having private pay, because in Minnesota, they only have organizations and agencies providing those homemakers and personal care services to eligible individuals in the home. I hope that answered the question.
Great, thank you. Our next question is, what traditional beliefs have you had to be sensitive to be effective to elders?
I think each elder is different. As our agency here, we have a QSP manager that goes and does the home visit. So once we get the call that one of our elders is in need of services and they qualify for Medicaid, or if we even do private pay, if they qualify and need any of our services, she goes out, makes that initial visit, and make sure that, you know, anything that's needed for the elder in any special way, she comes back to the office and she meets with one of the QSPs. We have a lead QSP that does most of all our trainings. If we have a new QSP that comes on, that lead QSP takes our QSP caregiver out and does all the training with them and stuff. So we really do cater to the family members and whatever their needs are and everything and stuff. So and with the NEC training, we do talk about that also when we do train our QSPs in the NEC curriculum. Do you have anything to add, Michelle, that I missed?
No, I think one of the things that you mentioned of, you know, how the QSP manager really does try to individualize picking the best caregiver for the elder. And so that's why they go out and they make that. Once the elder has picked the agency, there's an initial contact that's made, and she'll sit down and you know, not only will she go over some of the, you know, so they go over the care plan, that the services that have been approved by the home and community-based case manager. They go over that, so there's no confusion. And then, you know, she will, they come up with a schedule that works for the elder. And then she's just a good judge of character. And actually we've had a couple of instances where there's been times where we've had to change who the QSP was. They might have been working at one time and life happens and things, and people get comfortable or uncomfortable with people. And then there's had to be a change. And so I think there's just how we've been sensitive to those traditional beliefs of elders. And like Heather said, each one is unique. We just try to have really that constant communication with the elders or the family members so that it just alleviates problems before they come up.
Also, the HCBS worker really works well with our QSP manager. So if anything, if that caseworker thinks there's something needed or whatever, or that something's personal, the case manager will also make that visit with our QSP manager.
Okay, the next question is, did you negotiate an enhanced rate with North Dakota Medicaid as compared to non-native providers?
We did not, but that is, and you know, to be fair, I'm not sure we would have really gotten anywhere being the first tribal area to kind of to do that. I think now with the partnerships that we've been working with, and you know, like Heather mentioned, we're working with the other tribal areas as well to kind of if they're running into problems along the way, you know, thankfully they're willing to reach out to us and we're able to kind of share what we've learned. I think what we could maybe do, I think it would be helpful, is if the tribes went in now together. You know, if we can get 3 or 4 agencies, tribal agencies, I think we'd have a better leg to stand on. We did have one of our I don't know what her title is, but she was one of our, we used, like I said, we used to be county. So one of our county human service directors, she's been such a huge advocate of the tribal agency. She actually went to the state and tried to get a higher rate for one of the services, and she did get it bumped up a tiny bit, but so at least she tried. So
Fantastic, thank you. So our next question is, where can we look at the QSP training?
Colette, I'll let you go ahead and answer that one.
So like, if you're speaking directly about the Native Elder Caregiver curriculum, so as mentioned, you can look on our NRCNAA website to download the curriculum. You'd answer a few questions and then let us know how you plan to utilize the curriculum. We can do some follow-up. We do have a nursing faculty that we work with who sometimes can provide the training depending on where you're located and just, you know, what we could set up. We also, as Michelle mentioned, we're working on some Native Elder Caregiver curriculum modules that Michelle actually led this one for the family caregivers. So that one should be available soon. That's completed. And then we're also working on a project to break it down to modules that are for the skilled caregivers for the NAPP as well. So that'll be a project that we'll be working on this summer, and we hope to have that available by the end of summer. So those are trainings specific for the NAPP curriculum for the QSPs.
Thank you for that response. So we are approaching the end of our session here, and I know there are a few questions that we did not have time to get to. So I wanted to let everyone know if your question didn't get answered today, you can contact Heather Lawrence. Her email address is heather.lawrence@und.edu, and that email address has just been placed in the chat box, so you can pull her email address from the chat box and send any unaddressed questions to her. So I'd really like to thank Colette, Michelle, and Heather for joining us today and for sharing information on the Native Aging in Place project and for answering questions. In closing, I would like to remind everyone that we did record today's webinar and that the audio and the presentation slides will be made available online at cms.gov on the Tribal LTSS Technical Assistance Center website. Thank you so much again for joining today's webinar, and our session is now concluded.